Hey, and welcome back. I'm sure most of you out there know what this drum is, but for those of you that don't, it's a Ludwig Acrolite. It's one of the most time-tested, popular, utilitarian drums on the market, and there's about 1 million of these out there in the world that are still lasting today, even though many of them were made in the 70s and 80s. I found this one on Facebook Marketplace a few months ago and decided to give it a nice cleaning and really spruce it up with new heads. And at the end of the video, I fell in love with this drum. I really wanted to be able to use this not only for studio work, but for gigging. And the one flaw this drum has comes in the throw off. Now, if you've owned one of these drums or fixed one up, you're probably well aware of this P85 throw off. It's notorious for losing its tension over time. And aside from that, it doesn't have a way to fasten a snare strap to it. And you only have the ability to tie string around it, which for me is just really hard to do. Maybe that's just my fingers. Maybe that's just my problem. But in any case, I want this drum to serve me well for years to come. And I don't want to have to worry about turning it off between a song and tightening the wires just to have it stay where I had it at the beginning of the show. Now, Ludwig makes a great option for swapping this out, and it's mostly a retrofit part where you don't have to do any drilling or adjusting, but I've noticed the screws they include with it don't quite fit through the smaller holes drilled on here, and the butt plate, you have to do a little hack to make it work. Now, there's another company out there that makes retrofit parts to fit on this drum and tons of other drums because it's a universal fit. And that's Independent Drum Labs, or as we know it, INDe. This universal snare throw and butt plate comes in at a little over $70, so it's a bit more expensive than the Ludwig, but I'm never going to complain about paying a little extra money to support a small independent drum builder, and that's exactly what Josh from INDe Drum Co. is. I want to do a test with this before to show you the issues I have with keeping tension on this drum, but I don't have a scientific way to measure that. I'm sure there's one that exists, but I don't have it here in my basement. So I'm going to bring this drum over into the studio, set it up, give you a quick playing example before, and have the snares tuned fairly tight. Then I'm going to play continuously for 5 minutes, with every minute stopping to throw on and off the snare wires 5 times. I think that'll be a good representation of how this snare throw off performs over a long period of time, not only using it, actioning on and off, but playing on it. So let's go ahead and give that a shot. So without getting a chance to go back and listen to the recording to compare the beginning and the end right after one another, I could definitely feel and hear a difference in the tension on the snare wires. It was a lot looser and wetter at the end, so I think this is going to fix our problem, but I'm going to quick install it. It shouldn't be hard to do, and another reason I wanted to choose this one is anybody should be able to do this. If you've changed a drum head, you should be able to take care of swapping this out. You only need to remove one head to get these 2 pieces replaced, but since you have to remove the snare wires, I'd recommend leaving the batter head in place and just removing the resonant head. Once you have a way to access the inside, you can use a flathead screwdriver and a pair of pliers to remove the screws and nuts holding on the old throw-off and butt plate. I made sure to keep all these small washers, nuts, and screws together because in the case I would ever sell this drum, I'd like to be able to put all these original pieces back on to include with it, or maybe I'll just be able to use them for another project down the road. You can see here how the INDe throw-off has bolts that slide on a track to account for a variety of different hole spacing widths, but I will say this does make it trickier to align everything in place to secure with washers and bolts from the inside. One feature that I really appreciate on this system apart from the design is the lock nuts that are included. This should help avoid a scenario where things loosen up over time and you end up losing a screw that falls out, left with your drum not working in the middle of a gig on a dark stage and no chance of finding it later. Once I had everything tightened up with both the new throw-off and butt plate, I then went ahead and added my resonant head, tuned it up, and got to reattaching these snare wires. I wanted to switch to some nylon straps, but since I didn't have any, I decided to just stick with the snare cord for now, but I can definitely feel a better hold on the cord by not having to tie a knot around the throw-off and being able to clamp down with a drum key headed rod. That was a lot harder than I thought it was initially going to be. I did have an issue with the 2 bolts for the throw-off side were just a hair too thick. And when I say a hair too thick, it's like the bolts fit in there, but the threading was just a little bit too thick on top of the bolt to be able to get them through the hole. So I did have to drill it out. I know there's some drum purist out there who's going to be upset that I'm ruining the integrity of this Acrolite. There's a million of these out there. I'm definitely going to use this one for playing. I might as well make the investment with drilling it out and make it serve me well. If it really bothers you, you could probably go to the hardware store and just get a slightly smaller bolt, and then you wouldn't have to drill anything. What's weird is that on the butt plate side, the bolts were a lot thinner. I think Josh from INDe is a really thoughtful guy, so I'm sure there's a reason behind that. If he sees this video, maybe he'll leave it in the comments, but I'm not too worried about that. The only other tricky part with this is that in order to get the butt plate on, since it's universal fit and the bolt can slide on a track, it's kind of tricky to be able to get it centered between the lugs, so it took me some extra time to get it all lined up before I really cranked down and locked it in place. I can already tell that this drum can hold way more tension, and it's just a lot easier to throw it on and off. So let's take it over into the studio, do the same test. 5 minutes of playing, and we'll see what kind of results we get. That was the most annoying sort of demo I've ever done on this channel, and I never want to have to do anything like that again. With that said, I do think this held up much better. I haven't gone back and listened to the recording. That's just my initial thoughts from hearing it in the room and feeling the throw off as I was turning it on and off. So, INDe, great product. Make sure to buy their stuff. One thing I forgot to mention is that the way this throw off is designed, as far as a beaded shell like this Acrolite or a Superphonic, I had an issue getting the bottom to sit without interrupting this little protrusion. So what I did was I just added a couple tension rod washers underneath the throw off between the shell, and that lifted it enough off where I didn't have an issue with this bead anymore. So something many of you out there will need to consider, because I think there's a lot of Acrolite and Superphonic owners who would love to do this upgrade. Go check them out, support their work, and until next time, thanks.